across national and language boundaries, because these are your colleagues now. These are the people you'll be working with in the next few years of your research, of your writing, of conferences. You will be surprised at how much the same colleagues will be part of your academic life. So it's a good time to get to know them. Let me just tell you that you all for this project. So that's why we emphasize the need to continue to work on the things that you have to do. Let me also ask you, if you have any cell phones that could go off during the lecture, please just put them on vibrate or turn them off. I'm sure you don't want to be talking to anyone in the next few hours. Tell them you're busy. And as Jofene said, if you have internet access, don't be posting Facebook messages saying, oh, look at me, I'm in CODESRIA now. We want to really focus on this as serious scholars. What you heard yesterday was a rundown of some of the philosophies that are behind what we do. CODESRIA is also a place where we appreciate different perspectives. You've heard about providing opportunities for scholars that have been kicked out of their own places. We do value dissent. You do not have to agree with me. You do not have to agree with other scholars. But if you choose to disagree, have the grounds to do so. That's the best of academia. If you disagree, show me why you disagree. That's how we develop as scholars. And each one of you, I've read all your particular projects, and they have something to add to the existing literature. But you have to disagree on foundations that you can defend. So in the time that I will use today and the second lecture and the third one, basically what I want to do is to give you a sense of the things that have happened, especially through CODESRIA in the area of research on children and youth. I'm combining them because many times we are not able to demarcate when childhood ends and when youth starts. Sometimes, depending on certain contexts, children may become youth, or youth may be seen as children. So I know you're focused mostly on youth, but I just want to give you an overall sense of what might be very fluid definitions or boundaries for research. So today, I want to just give you a brief sense of what I think has been the trend in research on children and youth that has been developed and sponsored by CODESRIA and by people who are connected to CODESRIA. I am not ignoring all the other works, but I'm sure all the other works are available to you. And after this institute, the CODESRIA work will also be available to you. So since 1994, I think as I can recollect, CODESRIA has been focused on issues and research that connects children and youth in Africa through one of the programs that you've heard about, the Child and Youth Program. In 2002, CODESRIA launched the Child and Youth Institute. So you are in the 10th year of, so 10th anniversary of the institute. And it culminated in a publication that was titled Annotated Bibliography on Childhood with Emphasis on Africa. And it was written by a South African colleague, Patty Henderson. It's a small book. It's a really very useful text that you might want to look at as you also think about your own literature. This was published in 2003. This inaugural publication presented the major works in anthropology, sociology, and psychology, some from political science and economics, and some theoretical text from many parts of the world. 10 years later, this year, I was asked to put together a bibliography that looked at some of the other works that have come through since Patty's writing. But I chose to exclusively look at work that has been done within the African continent. And that should be available in a few months, I hope. I think our publications department is working on it, and they outline some of the themes that have been focused on in research. In the first text, Henderson's theoretical analysis on the study of youth and children emphasized the disconnect, on the one hand, of the ways in which adults think about and construct children and their lives, and on the other, how children actually experience their lives. So there are two ways: how adults think of children and how they construct the lives of children, and on the other, the actual lives that children live, the things they go through every day. Key issues were that we need to understand those two worlds and then ask ourselves, how well are we representing them? As researchers, we are asking, okay, we have our own perceptions of children, and there are lived experiences of children and youth. How are they connected? And we'll get to what kind of methodologies and issues we raise. A few more years later, around 2006, there was another gathering that brought together scholars looking at the literature on youth and Africa that had been published between 1996 and 2006. And in one of the papers, and you can see this project much later, it was edited by Carlos Cardoso here, and it's also available online. Two authors, Stephen Arroyo and Rebecca Nyonyintono, identified the following issues that faced research on children and youth during 1996 and 2006. I want to give you some of the things that people have done in research. First, they asked not to see African children as disadvantaged, but rather search for their virtues of their cultural heritage. So do not see them as disadvantaged, but look at their cultural heritage. What are the positives in their cultural heritage, historical backgrounds, and even the African civilizations? What are the values in that? So do not start on a negative note. Second, move from stereotypes of children as in the process of becoming to a process of being. So instead of saying children are becoming this, you think of children are this. And third, they noted that there was a clear lack of definition of the African child. So there was no definition. What do we mean when we say child or youth? What does that mean? And fourth, and finally, acknowledge that perspectives on African children are shaped by multiple factors. And some of these factors could be the researcher's worldview, donor priorities, and the desire to sell your paper to a prestigious journal. So basically, you're trying to package your work to an outside source rather than to be true to the realities of the child. So those are some of the issues that were raised. Our own resource person, Alcinda Anwana, and a colleague, De Boek, published a book that I would say has to be part of your literature. It's Makers and Breakers, Children and Youth as Makers and Breakers in Africa. And this book brought together a number of researchers and writers that have been focusing on youth in Africa for a long time. And they argued that we ought to start seeing children also and youth as having their own agency, the ability to do things on their own without being controlled by adults. The life that youth especially live have multiple paths, and we cannot always look at them as powerless or vulnerable. Neither can we look at them as always destructive, out of control. And they say that if we begin to see African childhood and youth beyond the constraining Western notions of vulnerability and innocence, and show how, for instance, advances in technology, the intensification of global processes, and the weakening of the nation state, we'll see a more complex picture of children. And some of your works have already started to show that the youth are much more complex than these aimless, vulnerable, out of control people or individuals. As we also move from the powerful Western notions of what constitutes humanity and dignity, which most of the times are predicated on the individual as the unit of analysis, we start to have a more complex view of youth in Africa, because worldviews matter. How we regard humans. It's not that we don't value the individual, but many African philosophies emphasize that the African individual is only better understood through connection to social networks. And the famous catchphrase from the philosopher John Mbiti says that I am because we are. And the idea that the individual can best be understood by an analysis of the connections that he or she has within the society. Despite these critiques, though, of not seeing children and youth as vulnerable and also out of control, there continues to be a lot of literature on similar approaches to research. The overwhelming focus of research publications on topics like HIV and AIDS, orphans, violence, child soldiers, child rights, street children demonstrate a continued interest in representing youth and children as both vulnerable and in need of adult protection. also in looking at youth as out of control and needing to be managed. There are some good explanations for this. It's not that there are not issues like this that face youth and children. No, that's not what I'm saying. But those are not the only issues that are facing youth and children. And there are some explanations. One is the need to find a global or universal definition of childhood and youthhood, and the social patterns through which to understand them. So we are trying to find one common definition of childhood and youthhood that we can all fit. Second, when we have that uniform understanding of childhood and youthhood, it will be easier to carry out research using a standard research protocol. So you have your category, you don't have to worry about it. You just now plug it into some research methodology. You can use the same structure of questions. You can use the same research methods. If you complicate it and say, wait a minute, these children are more complex, then it means you have to always look for new methods of research. It's much easier to have one size fits all, and then you say, let's move. We can say, street children in Benin, street children in Nairobi, street children in Kinshasa, and they all fit the same mode. Yet, we know those children are experiencing the streets in very different and unique ways. It takes a lot of work to get to those complexities. The other challenge is that we want to restrict specific age limits to children. So again, we're talking about the idea of definitions. We know from our colleagues in the Western world that there are specific age limits for when you can do this, get work, get paid for work, be left alone at home. But those of you who have grown up in families with many children, you realize that